몰라서 다도마 사람균이 신신나게 겸내긴 누군데
To begin with, I'd like to offer my greeting to the Source of Refuge, the community of the Sangha, the monks and nuns, and likewise to all of the Lamas Chulku's spiritual friends and all of our Dharma friends, male and female. I hope you are well. Today we are continuing where we left off the other day. So the point that we've come to is that we're speaking about the transmission of the lineage. Now, when we talk about the transmission of the lineage, there is the explanation of the northern transmission, the explanation of the Tibetan transmission, and the explanation according to the southern transmission, three primary ways of explaining them. So we will begin with the transmission from the northern transmission. The way it is described in the northern transmission, yesterday I spoke about it, how it's described in the chronicles of the transmission lineage. So today we're speaking according to the Ashoka Avadana and the Ashoka Sutra and the and other scriptures will talk about a list of 5 patriarchs. Now, one thing that we need to think about is that we think about the chronicles of the transmission of Dharma that we spoke about the other day. We've been through this, but one of the early texts that appeared either earlier than the chronicles of the transmission of the Dharma or before at the same time, it is also an important text, is the most important text about the transmission is called the Ashoka Avadana. Now, this is translated during the Western Jin period by a translator named An Fa Chin. So this is probably during the 3rd century. And so this is a text called the Avadana of the Ashoka Avadana. And there's also the Sutra, the Ashoka Sutra. And this was translated during the Liang dynasty by Sangavarma. And so this is probably around the 5th century. So these two texts are important texts that describe the transmission of the Dharma. Likewise, there are also important sources for the research into the Buddhist history during the time of King Ashoka. Likewise, there's another text than the Ashoka Avadana, the Ashoka Sutra, is one that appeared probably in the 5th century, and this is called the Divyavadana. And this is from a Sanskrit manuscript. And this also talks about the transmission of the Dharma. And it is very similar to the lineage taught in the Ashoka Avadana. Now, the lineage recorded in the Ashoka Avadana, the Ashoka Sutras, is similar to the one, is not a long lineage, just as like the lineage taught the other day in the chronicles of the transmission of Dharma. It's short, it has 5 generations. And so who's in the 5 generations? I think if you look at this, so who are the five patriarchs in this lineage? The first is Mahakashyapa, the second is Ananda. And then there's Madhyantaka, who's put separately here after the second, and then in the parentheses, the third is Shanakavasan, the fourth is Upagupta, and the 5th is Ditika. And so in this way, there are 5 patriarchs. So when you think about Upagupta, according to the Ashoka Avadana, he was actually the main guru of the Dharma king Ashoka. But first, I think the reason there, and we put Madhyantaka's name in parentheses. Now, the reason why I put it in parentheses is something I ought to mention to you. So, as I mentioned before in the Ashoka Avadana, the Ashoka Sutra, it says that there is Madhyantaka who was ordained with Shanaka Vasaka. His name is Madhyantaka. This is the name in Sanskrit. So in Tibetan, he's called Nyima Gungpa. Now this Madhyantaka was a student, became a disciple of Ananda just before Ananda's death. And it does discuss in these two texts how the lineage was entrusted to him. It also describes how in the future he would go to Buddhism, go to Kashmir to spread Buddhism. However, in terms of how he is actually connected to Shanakavasan, or how he's actually connected to Upagupta, is not clearly described. In general, in terms of with the sequence described in the Ashoka Avadana has a few internal contradictions in the sequence. The reason why this is when it discusses how the teachings were entrusted to Dithika. It says that the teachings were passed down from Ananda to Madhyantaka, who gave it to Shanakavasan, who gave it to Upagupta. So it does say this. But if that is the case, so if Ananda gave it to Madhyantaka, and then Shanaka gave it to Shanakavasan, but it also says earlier that when Ananda transmitted the teachings to Shanakavasan, what it says is, so this is the text that appears. Mahakashyapa entrusted the teachings to me and passed to Nirvana. Now I will pass to Nirvana, so you must bear the teachings of the Buddha and protect them. So this does appear there. Now, so this is a contradiction. So the earlier and the later are in opposition. Similarly, in the Mulasavastavada minor text topics of the Vinaya, what it says is that, I shall also show you this citation. You'll immediately understand when you see it. What this says is, these texts from the minor topics of the Vinaya says, it is prophesied that 100 years after the Bhagavan passes to Nirvana, a bhikshu named Madhyantaka will appear, and he will enter the teachings here. Therefore, son, you should enter the teachings. So this is the text as it appears. So there is this word, which says that 100 years after the parinirvana, there will be Madhyantaka will appear. And also, the third fascicle of the great records of travels to the Western, so explained that it says that 50 years after the parinirvana, Madhyantaka will be born, and that he be the upholder of the Ananda's teachings on the meaning. And so does as if he did not meet Ananda. Now, as I said before, and we're looking at these texts as described before, most of the sources from the Northern Transmission explain that following Ananda's prophecy, Madhyantaka went to Kashmir to spread the teachings. However, they do not say much about how he was a direct disciple. This is not mentioned in most of the texts of the Northern Tradition. So a few say that he was Ananda's student, but most say that he was predicted by predicted by Ananda on his predicted by Ananda on his last testament, but it does not say that he was a direct disciple. So, according to the Sinhalese tradition, it says that Madhyantaka went to Kashmir during the time of Ashoka on Moggaliputta Tisa's instructions. And so, this is similar. Moggaliputta Tisa sent Madhyantaka to Kashmir. So, this is probably 160 years, around 160 years after the parinirvana. However, at this point, what it says in some of the literature of the tradition, Madhyanta is actually, it's like he's been inserted into this. They've insisted on inserting him into the lineage. And so what is the reason why he had to be inserted into the transition? So this is described in in Taranata's History of Buddhism in India. What it says is to summarize this, it says that the people of Kashmir, what the Kashmiri Buddhists say is that Madhyantaka must be considered as one of the patriarchs of Buddhism. And the reason is while he lived in Central Land, looking after the Dharma, at that time, disciples of the Ardhashanikavas were few in number. It's only after Madhyantaka that Kashmir, it's only after Madhyantaka's departure for Kashmir that Shanakavasa's disciples increased in number. And so this way, they say that there should be counted as like 8 being patriarchs. If you count Madhyantaka, then that comes to 8, not 7. Now, what others say is that Madhyantaka is that the teacher, the Buddha himself, predicted that Madhyantaka was to convert Kashmir, and so Ananda directly instructed him to do so. And this is all that it says, but it's actually that Ananda actually trusted the teachings only to Shanakavasin, and so in this way there are only 7 to be counted in this line of succession. So this is what it says. So most Tibetans follow this tradition of there being 7 patriarchs. So if there are 8, then the way it would be is you'd have Ananda, then Madhyantaka, and then Shanakavasin. Right. How if you counted 7, then you have Ananda immediately entrusting it to Shanakavasin, immediately following. In any case, Madhyantaka, according to the northern tradition, was sent by Ananda to Kashmir. In the southern tradition, he was sent by Moggaliputta Tissa. But whoever he was sent by, he was actually an extremely important figure in the spread of the teachings in Kashmir. And there's really no dispute about this. So for that reason, the Buddhists from Kashmir consider him to be very important. And in particular, the Kashmir Great Exhibition or the Kashmir Sarvastivadins became very powerful. When they became powerful, then they just naturally insisted on inserting Madhyantaka into the lineage of patriarchs. And so this is the hypothesis of many present-day researchers. Now, generally, we're talking about this lineage of transmission. Of like a patriarch, of course, then the previous patriarch would have to have been their preceptor, and or they would have to have a connection of master-disciple. And so the question of which of this it should be is something we need to discuss. For example, there is a disagreement over whether Ananda's preceptor was Mahakashyapa. According to the Mula Srivastava Vinaya, it is said that Ananda's preceptor was Dashabala Kashyapa. Utsala Tenwa says that Dashabala and Kashyapa and Mahakashyapa are 2 names for the same person. However, in the Mula Sarvastivada Minor Topics, it says that after the parinirvana of the Buddha, when the Buddha's and when the Buddha's the cremation, there at that point there were four. In the first one there was the all-knowing Adyata. Second was Dashabala, Kashyapa. The fourth was Mahakashyapa, and the fourth was Ananda. And so Dashabala and Mahakashyapa are said to be must therefore be separate. Likewise, there's even if you say that the difference between Mahakashyapa and Dashabala, I'm not sure what the source of this saying. But if you look at the Pali, it says that Ananda's. It says that that the preceptor for Ananda was Balatatissa. So for that reason, many present-day researchers say that so they do not accept that Kashyapa was Ananda's preceptor. But then you think about the lineage of elders and the lineage of the vows are a little bit different. There's a bit of a difference. To talk about the lineage of transition, think about the previous leader of the Buddhist teachings, then giving the responsibility to the next person who would be capable of upholding the responsibility of upholding the teachings. That's what we're speaking about there. But when you think about the lineage of the vows, the lineage of preceptors, you've got the lineage of the kempos or preceptors who give the vows. And so that is what it refers to. So something's a paratrip, is it? So I don't think that there's necessarily a requirement that if it's the patriarch, that the previous patriarch would have been the preceptor of the latter. So now when you think about Mahakashyapa and Ananda, we've discussed that in a little bit, the relationship between Mahakashyapa and Ananda. As all of you know, Mahakashyapa, as you all know, within the Sangha, he was the most well-respected figure. And during the Fast Council, there was the Council of the 500, the person who presided over it, who guided it, was Mahakashyapa. Likewise, in the four agamas, now these are not in Tibetan, but they are in Chinese. And they're also in Pali, as I described last year. In any case, in the four agamas, it is said that the Buddha gave half of his seat to Kashyapa and told him to teach the Dharma. So that is one historical event. The second is that the Buddha himself extended his own robe, outer robe that is made out of rags, and he gave it to exchanged it with Mahakashyapa for Kashyapa's outer robe, and he gave his old robe to Mahakashyapa. So even at the end of Mahakashyapa's life, when he was passing away, he was still wearing the robes that the Bhagavan Buddha had given to him. And so they entered entered a cave at the top of the Gaudapada mountain. And so the Buddha showed such great respect to Mahakashyapa. What it shows is that after Shariputra and Moggallana had passed away, Mahakashyapa became was the one most representable, most capable of taking the Buddha's place. And for this way, Ananda's actual preceptor may not have been Mahakashyapa, it could have been someone else. However, but because Mahakashyapa had such great activity and renown, that he became the first person the main person whom Mahakashyapa could pass this to. So whether you think about them, we're talking about them as being preceptor and disciple, but there's no choice but to present Mahakashyapa as the first in the lineage prior to Ananda. Now when you think about the four agamas in the Vinaya, there are some discussion of some disagreements or some disharmony between Kashyapa and Ananda. For example, even after the Buddha passed away, Ananda was, Kashyapa mentioned many of his faults and prevented from coming to them. But as soon as Kashyapa passed away, there was no disciple of the Buddha who was more well-known than Ananda. There was no one who was no more well-known than Ananda. And Ananda himself is also said to have lived a very long life. If according to the verses of the Teras, the elders, in the Pali tradition, as well as in the great commentary on the 100th written by, that's said to be written by Nagarjuna, what it says is that Ananda served as the Buddha's attendant for 25 years. He spent 25 years serving the Buddha as attendant. And if we think that the Ananda must have served the Buddha from the time that he went away, so then Ananda would have been around 45 years old when the Buddha passed away. Even after the Buddha's parinirvana, Ananda may possibly have lived another 30 or 40 years. So for that reason, Ananda lived for a very long time, and he had very wide activity. And so for this reason, later, during the Second Council, most of the at this time, there are the eight most important elders, and among them, at least 6 of them were students of Ananda. And this is just mentioned in the Vinayas of all the different schools. And so for this reason, Ananda later became, after Mahakashyapa parinirvana, he became extremely influential. And so this describes about Mahakashyapa and Ananda. So the next we have Shanakavasa. So he was the 3rd of the patriarchs after Ananda, according to the Ashokya Vadana, Ashokya student. So Shanakavasan, his preceptor was Ananda. Now the place where he was born is in the east, but he primarily spread the Dharma in the west. Now when you look at the different existing Vinayas that are from, and we look at their descriptions of the Second Council, and so this is around the time, in describing the element, they say that it happened around 100 years after the passing of the Buddha. And among them, the most well-known elders, there are 8 of these elders, and there's a different description. There are slightly different variations in the different scriptures of the different schools, but what happens is what it says is that there's Sabakami from the east, he was one, and from the west there was Revata and Sambhuta. So Sambhuta in the Pali, they say Sambhuta Shanakavasika. So it says his name is Sambhuta Shanakavasin, like he has a second name. And so for that reason, so there are these 3 great elders who are the same in all of these. And likewise in the Pali, there's the Satasataka Khandika. There's the 700 part text, the Satak Kapataka, and this mentions Shanakavasin. Now there, so in the northern text it says that the elder's name is Sambhuta, but in the Pali text it's Sambhuta Shanakavasin. So the northern tradition says Sambhuta, it doesn't say Sambhuta Shanavasi. But whether question of whether the name is Shanakavasin or not, and there's a Sambhuta in the Pali traditions and a Shanakavasin, and likewise in the Ashoka, there's the Shanakavasin, the Akshara, they were similar in that it's that both are said to be the students of Ananda. Likewise, in terms of their dates, and they are both people who appeared 100 years following the Buddha's parinirvana. And similarly, if we think about the places where they stayed, the Sambhuta Shanakavasa of the Second Council, according to the Pali Vinaya, resided at the mountain called Ahoganga. Now, according to the Ashokanavadana and the Ashokana Sutras, said that Shanakavaska lives at the Urumunda Parvata. And so so this is the name of the mountain that he lived at. So the names of the mountains are not the same. But in both the northern and the southern tradition, the texts say that if you would be able to reach both places by boat. And so for this reason, so this is one event. So for these reasons, many different researchers believe that the Sambuddha Shanakavasi, who's mentioned in the Pali Vinaya, and the Shanakavasi mentioned in the chronicles of the transition of the Dharma are the same person. So this is something that now this is something that I will also describe when I talk about the difference between the transmissions of the southern and the northern traditions. So now what we're discussing is the transmission lineage that's taught in the Ashokanavadana. And so now according to that, the fourth of the patriarchs is Upagupta. Now Upagupta is being the fourth elder is taught in many different traditions, and it's also taught in this is said in the Ashoka Avadana. It's also said in the Ashoka Sutra. They all said that Shanakavasan transmitted the teachings to Upagupta. So when did Upagupta live? If we think about his dates, when we look at the related manuscripts, is that the end of Upagupta's life was at the beginning of Ashoka's reign. And if we think about when Ashoka's reign must have began, then in sort of a rough estimate is that it began 160 to 170 years after the Buddha's parinirvana. Now, if we say that Upagupta was alive at the same time as Ashoka, it is said that Upagupta attained the result 100 years after the Buddha's parinirvana. So if he were 20 years at that time, and when Ashoka appeared, then he probably would have been 130 years old. So the question is, could he have lived that long to that time? Now, you can't say that categorically that he would have been impossible, but it's difficult to get everyone to accept it if you do say that. So for this reason, what many contemporary scholars say is the account of the northern tradition is that the Upagupta among the transition of the Dharma, and when it is said that he was at the same time as King Ashoka, is that they're confusing Kala Ashoka, the black Ashoka, from the Dharma King Ashoka. In any case, the Kala Ashoka and the Dharma King Ashoka, the name is Ashoka similar, and so the two got mixed up. And it's said that someone who is a contemporary of Kala Ashoka was a contemporary of the Dharma King Ashoka. And so in any case, now this is in terms of saying that the Kala Ashoka and there's also the Sutra of Shariputra's question. This is in the Mahasanghika school, and what it says there is that it was after Upagupta passed away that the Maurya dynasty Ashoka, so this is the Maurya dynasty Upagupta, appeared after Upagupta. And this is a little bit easier for people to accept. So if you take it according to the teachings in Sutra of Shariputra's question, is that Shariputra lived around 100 years and passed away before Ashoka was born, and this would be okay to say. And this would also match the account of Tadanath's account in his History of Buddhism in India, that Ashoka's youth coincided with the last part of Ditika's life. However, Tadanath himself says in the History of Buddhism in India that it says that Ashoka's reign began 100 years after the Parinirvana. And so it's going, taking it a given and that the Kala Ashoka was Dharma King Ashoka. He must have had some difficulty at this, but when you look at it, Tadanata had a different because there are three different Ashokas that are taught, the three different times that are taught for Ashokas. So there's basically no time to say, no choice but to present it like that because we talk about the Black Ashoka or Kala Ashoka and the Dharma King Ashoka. If you don't distinguish the two of them, there are many difficulties that occur. So then after Bhagapta, the person was Ditaka. So Ditaka was the fifth patriarch. And his name, Ditaka, his name is mentioned in the Ashoka Avadana and many other texts as well. So that these Chinese texts that I've mentioned. And so he's taught in both of these texts. The way his place he was born, we taken it according to the chronicles of the transmission of Dharma, he was born in Mathura. I believe if you translate Mathura into Tibetan, it's Chomla. According to Buddha's Tadanata says that he was born in the land of Pagye. This is in the central India. So he was more or less contemporary with Ashoka. However, but there is no discussion of the two of them having any connection. This is not described in any of the texts. Now, the reason, according to Tadanata's History of Buddhism in India, is that Ditaka, during the last part of his life, was frequently ill. He was always sick. And because of this, he was unable to perform much activity. And he basically was in the area of Kaushambi and just wasn't bedridden at that time and wasn't able to go very far. And so for that reason, it's possible that this is the reason why he did not have much of a connection to Ditaka. And the time that he passed away was around the end of Ashoka's reign, around 240 years after the Buddha's parinirvana. Now, one issue that we have to take some interest in is, when you think about the Ashoka Avadana, the Great Exposition, whether the older or the newer transitions, the earlier or the later translations, or the chronicles of the transition of the Dharma, many of the scriptures would say is that during the time of Upagupta, many of the scriptures of the Buddha were lost, and the Sangha began to group into factions. Now, this does appear in these texts, and if we look at this, we see that at this time, like the patriarch at this time, was not held in high regard as the earlier patriarchs and did not have as much influence or power. And so this happened during the last part of Upagupta's left. Then from that time on, from Upagupta on, the elders did not have as much, or the patriarchs did not have as much influence as before. In brief, the disappearance of a patriarch of the lineage occurred because the disparate views and conduct in the Buddhist Sangha. Because the disparate views and conduct there's eventually the original split into schools, and then the unity of the Buddhist Sangha was lost. And then because of the different attachments and factionalism between the schools, and no matter how learned or venerable people were, people respected or they respected their own schools, people's foremost, and so there's basically no way that there could be a single patriarch whom everyone respected, and this is basically the situation that gradually developed. And the beginning of this process began, if we look at these texts, during the time of Upagupta. And so it's like the beginning of the internal disagreements in the Sangha. So this is, I think, an important point. So in any case, when I talk about this 5-generation lineage, And if we think about this as like the more main framework of the lineage and the chronicles of the transition of the Dhamma. Because as I mentioned before, it says that there are 5 lineages, and then you add a couple more. And so the 5 are like the basis, they're like the foundation of the transmission. Likewise, when we talk about the 5 patriarchs in the main text of the Ashoka Avada and the Ashoka Sutra, both of these are, of course, talked about, they're combined with discussion of the time of King Ashoka. So what this shows is that the lineage of so like the connection between the patriarchs and the great dynasty and the king. And so for instance, in order to create the authority and the historical significance of this, if they're linked together, it increases their authority and its significance. Likewise, the lineage of transmission, according to the Ashoka Sutra and so forth, one feature is that it shows the influence of Sarvastivada. And the reason why this is because the place where Upagupta practiced the teachings was Mathura. And this later became a main area for the Sarvastivada school. Likewise, now we think about the 5 patriarchs taught in the Ashoka Avada and the Ashoka Sutra, and are very similar to the 5-generation lineage taught in the southern transmission. It's like they have basically the same weight. The 5 patriarchs taught in the northern tradition and the 5 patriots taught in the Pali Vinaya basically have the same status, the same significance. However, the main difference between the two is that in the northern transmission, or in the Sarvastivada tradition, and in the Pali and the Vajrapada tradition, they disagree about who was the main guru of King Ashoka. The northern tradition says it was Upagupta, whereas the southern tradition says it was Moggaliputta Tissa. But we will talk about these points when we speak about the southern transition, so we don't need to go into them now. So next, what I'd like to speak about next is this. What I'd like to speak is that variations exist in the other Vinaya collections and historical texts. So as I was speaking before about the chronicles of the Dharma tradition from the northern transmission of Buddhism, there's also the Ashoka Avadana and the Ashoka Sutra, and they have the 5-generation lineage. And so the Chronicle speaks about 24 patriarchs, and the Ashoka Avadana and the Ashoka Sutra talk about 5 patriarchs. And we look at the Vinaya texts and other historical documents from the northern transition. They have, if we think about what are the different ways they describe the transmission of the Dharma, first of all, we need to begin with the Mahasanghaka of Vinaya. We're talking about the section, and the second is the 28 generation lineage of the Noble India from the Chan lineage. And the second is the summary. The third is summary of the northern transition. So first we begin with the Mahasanghaka transmission. Now, when you think about the northern transition, and we look at the Vinaya texts and the other texts, they do have some different ways of describing the transmission of the lineage. For example, in the Mahasanghaka Vinaya, the Mahasanghaka Vinaya does not clearly present the lineage transmissions. However, when it describes the Second Council and mentions the names of the arhats who attended the Second Council, the 8 insignificant apartments. Of course, there are 700 arhats, but among them, most important were 8. And so these 8 important arhats, when you think about the list of the names, the southern transmission and the Mahasangika texts. So the Mahasangika is different from all of the other northern transition, and so this is so it disagrees with Sarvastivada. And so this shows that Mahasangika has its own particular account of the history. Now, there's also a text of the Mahasangika school called the Sutra Shariputra's Question, which does discuss the topic of the transmission. And what this says is that after my parinirvana, Mahakashyapa and others will be a great support for the bhikshus and the bhikshunis, no different from me. Mahakashyapa would trust it to Ananda, and to Madhyanta, Madhyanta to Shanakavasin, Shanakavasin to Upagupta, and after Upagupta, the Mauryan king Ashoka will appear. Sutras and Vinaya will spread widely in the world. But this is what it says. Now here, what's different in this particular description of the transmission is that Madhyantaka. The difference is Madhyantaka is inserted between Ananda and Shanakavasin. The first patriarch is Mahakashyapa entrusted it to Ananda transmitted it to Madhyantaka, and then Madhyantaka transmitted it to Shanakavasin. And so that is the greatest difference here. Now, the way that this is described does not really match the Chronicles of the Transmission of the Dharma taught, which says that Madhyantaka what it says in the Chronicles of the Transition of the Dharma says that Madhyampa was sent by Ananta. He did as Ananta told him and went to Kashmir to spread the teachings. And so they're just talked about as like a subsidiary lineage, but he's not an actual elder. Now, what it says in the Ashoka Avadana, it says that it does say on the side that Madhyantaka is considered a patriarch, but in the main text, Madhyantaka is not considered one of the patriarchs. However, when it talks about how Kashmir, there's discussion of him being in Pantra, but the question of him being that is the issue is that he went to spread the teachings in Kashmir. It's not he's considered a main figure in the lineage. Otherwise, they're basically very similar. So that was from the transition of the Mahasangika. Now, another text from the northern tradition is the Chan school, or the Dhyana. We talk about Zen, the Zen school. In Tibet, is what we used to call in Tibet the Chinese Hashangs that we considered so bad. When we talk about the Chinese Hashans, in actuality, what we're talking about are the Zen or the Chan school. When we talk about the Zen school lineage, they talk about the 28 patriarchs of the noble land, from the Buddha all the way down, counting the Buddha all the way down to Bodhidharma. They talk about 28. Then Bodhidharma brought the Zen Dharma to China and spread it there. And so including Bodhidharma, they spread to 28. So they talked about the 28 Indian patriarchs. And so this is a very particular account of this. And it comes from the Chinese Zen tradition. Now, when we think about the 28 in the Chan lineage, as I mentioned the other day, it's based on that chronicles of the transmission of the Dharma that I spoke of before. It takes that as like the framework, and then it changes a little bit and also increases it. Now the increase is that they extended the lineage. They made it longer, and the reason is that the Indian lineage of the Zen tradition and so there, the 24 from the Critical Transition of Dharma adds a few to it so that there are 28 generations. And this goes from the lineage from Mahakashyapa is taken as a basis, and then it adds a few later patriarchs. Vashishtan, Punyamitra, and Pragyatara, and Bodhidharma. So these are the ones they normally add. Likewise, they also, a different factor, another feature of the Zen lineage is that they switch the main figures. The most important person they put is the 28th, the Bodhidharma. He created the lineage, and he brought it to China, and he spread it there, and then China became the center for the Zen lineage. So then he became the most important figure in this, became Bodhidharma himself. Likewise, the M was probably different, and the reason for this is that if you think about it's not just about the history, but the Zen Orthodox, they looked at it as like a special lineage of the pith instructions. Like, for example, in this sort of, aside from the Buddha's origin, we have the pith instructions, the essence lineage or the ultimate lineage, and we have this as a separate lineage, and that we don't teach to people, don't have this, and so that is what we have. So if we talk about is, in order to prove that this lineage of pith instruction is that they created this lineage. Likewise, to show that their own Dharma has a lineage that reached back all the way to the Buddha, and such as a very respectable transmission. This is not a transition. The transition comes from not from the words, but when it comes from the meaning. And so this is the reason why they have the 28 lineage people. So if you look at the 28 members of the lineage, so if you look at this, the Chronicles of the Transition of Dharma on the left columns is what I described the other day, and then on the right side you have the Zen lineage. So fundamentally, they're on the basis they're the same, but they're a little bit different. Now, the Zen lineage is written primarily in the Sanskrit. The Chronicles is written primarily in the Tibetan. So here, the third is like, for example, it's given as Madhyantaka. And then after that, after the Madhyantaka, you have Shanavasa, that's the same. Then Upagupta and Dittika is the same. And so these 5 are the same as in the Ashoka Sutra and so forth that I mentioned before. Now, from here, they begin to differ. The 6th is, according to the Chronicles, the transmission. And most of them are. Some of them are the same and some are not. So in the Ashoka Sutra and Ashoka, they only have 5 generations, and after that, in the Chronicles, they have until 24. And the Zen has basically the same. There's just a few variations, but most of them are the same. I think basically up to 24, more or less the same. And then there's 4 that are add. So these are the ones. If you look at the Zen lineage, you see that now Shanavasa and Upagupta here, and Shubhamitra, And then Sangaraksha. There are several of these added to the Zen lineage. So they do. Last one is Sangaraksha, and then the last one, number 28, would be Bodhidharma. So that is. Now there are other. Now within the other, Northern Transmission, there are 5 different Vinaya translations, and among them, there are several different discussions of the transmission of the Dharma. But in the actuality, these lineage of the transmission Dharma are not primarily passing on the lineage, but primarily speaking about the lineages of Khenpos or preceptors. And so for this one, is actually very similar to the transition according to the Southern transition. So in the Southern transition, they primarily speak about the lineage of the preceptor and the ordained masters. So, so in this way, within the Vinayas taught in the lineage transition are basically presenting the lineage of the vows, the lineage of the preceptors. Sarvastivada is a little bit different. So because they're very similar to the Northern transition, so later when we speak about the Southern tradition, I will speak about them then. So this discusses the Vinaya in different documents. This talks about the Northern transition description of the transition of the teachings. So next, if we think about the first thing, if we think about the most important text is the Chronicles of the Transition of the Dharma. This is the longest and the most detailed. But it doesn't, not just a recording of a singular source, but it combines many different sources. And as we mentioned the other day, it combines the lineages of many so as to have a longer lineage. And so to show that there was a longer unbroken lineage, it was made long. It was lengthened to 24. Now, also, when thinking of the important things within the patriarchs, it's the 5 first patriarchs, they're like the basis or the foundation for this. And so, Mahakashyapa was like the life force of the Sangha community after they passed away. This greatest achievement was convening the first council, where they unified the Sutra of Vinaya, and they made a strong organization for the Sangha. And so basically, after the Buddha passed away, the undisputed leader of the Sangha was Mahakashyapa. And he passed his leadership responsibility to Ananda. So Ananda, as everyone knows, we don't need to say, he was the Buddha's attendant. He spent many years serving the Buddha, and he had the opportunity to hear most of the Buddha's teachings. And so, for that reason, after Mahakashyapa passed into Parinirvana, Ananda led the Sangha community for several decades. And he had a very widespread activity. And in the end of his life, he entrusted the teachings to Shanakavasim. And at the same time, he dispatched his disciple Madhyantaka to the northwest, to Kashmir, to spread the Dharma, as according to some accounts. Then after that, there's Shanakavasa entrusted the teachings to Upagupta. They had the relation of the teacher and student. According to the Northern transmission text, such as the biography of King Ashoka, they clearly said that Upagupta was King Ashoka's root teacher. Now, the way that he became the main teacher is that he displayed some miracles, and he displayed miracles and taught Dharma, and And because of this, Kangashoka was able to take refuge in Buddhism, and that became the transmission of Buddha into like a world religion. And following, this is the person that Upagupta transmitted the Dharma to was Ditthikaka. And so this is the discussion in the northern transmission. And so this is very similar to the Mahasangha's position and also to the Zen lineage, where they speak of the 28. And so there are these many different accounts. So we've described all of those. So I think this is probably a good place to leave it for tonight.